Welcome to MD Source, helping you become a more informed you when it comes to your health. With a mission to share the most accurate and up-to-date medical advice and tips for healthy living, MD Source has conversations with real doctors and medical professionals who are the experts on the topics you want to know about. Pamela Miles, a Reiki master, talks about the benefits of Reiki, what it is, and how it ties into traditional medicine. And now, here's Morgan Hare.
Good afternoon, this is Morgan Hare from MD Source and the Alliance in Reconstructive Surgery, and I'm here with Pamela Miles, who's a professional Reiki master. So Pamela, tell me about your background and how you got interested in Reiki.
I was interested in Reiki for years before I actually found a credible enough source to think in terms of studying it. But my background was that I started studying meditation and yoga when I was a kid. And by the time I learned Reiki practice, I had lived in an ashram in India for a couple of years, and I was a meditation teacher and a professional healer practicing what would probably now be called mind-body medicine, but back then it was just weird. There were the people who were interested and the people who were not interested. And I was pregnant with my daughter and feeling good, but that first trimester blah kind of feeling, low level nausea, fatigue, the usual. And a friend learned to practice Reiki and said to me, "Let me give you a treatment. I think you're going to like this." So 32 years later, I guess she was right. But it was really that the first, let's say, 5 minutes of her practicing on me that opened the door, because, I had a 5-year-old son. I knew that I was happier and liked myself and everyone around me better when I got to meditate every day. And I remembered how hard it was when he was an infant, and I was wondering, what am I going to do with a 5-year-old and another infant? So although I'm not somebody who is usually looking for fast and easy, at that point, fast and easy was exactly what I needed. And Reiki practice offered the experience and the benefits of spiritual practices like meditation and yoga, fast and easy.
And how did you train then to become a Reiki master?
I trained the old-fashioned way. I trained with Reiki masters, and I was fortunate that I learned to practice the way that the practice was brought from Japan to the United States in the late 1930s, before Americans started making changes to it. So I, have the very simple, very accessible and effective practice, which ironically in the desire to, make it seem more credible or validated or something, Americans have actually complicated Reiki practice and added things like chakras, for example, which, it's a different system. It's the Indian system. It's not the Japanese system. And so a practice that is so valuable because of its accessibility, simplicity, and effectiveness has for many people become unnecessarily complicated. But I've been practicing so long that I missed out on that.
So is Reiki, is its origin Japanese?
It's a spiritual practice that started with a man named Mikao Usui in Japan in the 1920s. Yes, it's a modern day spiritual practice.
That's so interesting. So if somebody has breast cancer, how might Reiki help them?
Reiki practice can help people addressing breast cancer in the same way that it helps everybody, because it's balancing. and it gently evokes a self-healing response from deep within the system. So instead of a Reiki professional actively doing something to you during a treatment, what that person is doing is, in a sense, reminding your system of its capacity to self-heal. And this is always a good idea, but especially when undergoing conventional medical care, because conventional medicine is done to people. And for all the wonderful things that conventional medical treatments can do, they are still traumatic in a certain way. You know, they're arduous, and the whole setting is often uncomfortable. And so what Reiki practice does is engages the patient's capacity to self-heal so that they're able to, first of all, feel better. And that's so important, because when we feel better, we feel more hopeful about our outcomes, right? And when we feel better, we function better, and life becomes easier, and we can do more of the things that help to support us. But also, when we feel better, we actually heal better. Feel better, heal better. And so to be able to make use of the all of the amazing things that conventional medicine can do, and to be able to support yourself from within at the same time, seems like a recipe for success, don't you think?
Absolutely. So does Reiki treat the whole person, including the body, emotions, mind, and spirit?
Yes, Reiki practice is balancing, and that balancing response, that self-healing response, comes from the timeless core that we have within all of us that, you know, we can think of as our spiritual selves, that part of us that isn't limited by being the body or, you know, our thoughts or our emotions, that part of us that everybody, even if you don't have a regular spiritual practice, experiences when they're deeply relaxed and they notice that you are the witness of your thoughts, for example, you know, where you feel this inner spaciousness.
So how does that work?
How does what work?
How does Reiki work?
How does Reiki practice work? Well, this is always my favorite part when I am lecturing to medical students or, you know, speaking at medical conferences or in hospitals, and doctors say, you know, what is the mechanism of action, which is med speak for how does it work?
Right.
And the response that I've been giving for decades is science does not yet know. And that's what doctors need to know, and they're actually quite satisfied by that. If there is a pathway that is known, they want to know that, but if there's not, if it's working and there's no harm attached to it, that's okay too. So we don't know what it is that happens when someone who's trained in Reiki practice places a hand on themselves or someone else. We don't know why the person responds with this self-healing response, but we do have some beginning evidence, research evidence, of what the response is. And so in the sense of the response, how does it work? By eliciting a self-healing response that moves the system out of that stress state, that sympathetic nervous system dominance, into the parasympathetic nervous system dominance, which is the rest, digest, repair phase.
And does it help somebody who's going through treatment, does it help them relax and feel at peace?
Generally, relaxation, feelings of peacefulness, calmness are the first thing that people notice, because most of us are unbalanced in the direction of being stressed. But it's important to keep in mind that Reiki practice is balancing. So if you're relaxed to the point of being lethargic, for example, people might find that they actually feel energized after a Reiki treatment because it's balancing. You see, like for example, one commonly reported benefit of Reiki practice is improvement in blood pressure, and people will often say, "Oh, my Reiki practice manages my high blood pressure. It lowers my blood pressure," but it only lowers their blood pressure because they had high blood pressure. If somebody has low blood pressure or normal blood pressure, Reiki practice is not going to lower it, because Reiki practice is balancing.
Right.
So if the blood pressure is low, I've seen people, and in fact I'm one of them, that my blood pressure actually raised to a more normal range.
That's really interesting.
Well, this is what holism in healthcare and medicine is all about. It's bringing the spiritual aspect, which is the big picture, which is the picture in which balance makes sense, rather than in conventional medicine, all of the protocols, the procedures, the pharmaceuticals, they are directed at a specific outcome. And sometimes, there's a bit of damage that happens in the pursuit of that specific outcome, and in the long run, it's worth it. But Reiki practice, because it's balancing, helps the body to repair that damage so that you can really get the best results possible.
So what is a Reiki treatment like? What happens during a treatment?
Generally, people will either lie down fully clothed on a treatment table that might look, similar to a massage table, or they can also sit, preferably in a comfortable chair. But, if you're just getting a little brief treatment, you can be in any chair. And the Reiki practitioner, traditionally, the Reiki practitioner will place hands lightly touching the body. And this is important because we have a lot of research that documents that appropriate human touch is healing. So we can think of Reiki practice as touch plus. But the touch is light, it's not manipulative, and whenever necessary, the touch can be just off the body. For example, if somebody has a burn, or when I'm working with people who are victims of trauma, or they've been attacked or mugged or something like that, and they're very skittish about being touched, then I'll always float my hands and give them the option to pull my hands down to their body when they feel comfortable. So I think most Reiki practitioners move through a protocol. I have specific placements that I move from one to the next, all of them non-invasive. And yet, it's important in describing a Reiki treatment to make the point that there are no standards for Reiki practice. So there's enormous diversity in terms of approaches and also in terms of training. But traditionally, it's light touch to a clothed body and moving through a series of placements. For me, that would be 12 placements for a professional treatment, 4 on the head, 4 down the front of the torso, and then I ask people to turn over if they're able to and place hands on an additional 4 placements on their back.
And what does that feel like to the person when somebody's...
It feels so good.
Does it?
It feels so good. The words that people commonly use to describe how they feel after a Reiki treatment are things like I mentioned already: relaxed, calm, peaceful, but also words that have to do with comfort. I feel safe. I feel like I've come home. I feel like I'm myself again. or I didn't realize how off my game I was. I feel like I haven't felt this part of myself in a long time. So a sense of coming back to a sense of wholeness and wellness, which is the essence of our spiritual self.
Is it safe?
Yes, Reiki practice is safe, but you always want to really kind of grill your professional before you sign on, because as I mentioned before, there are no standards. And there are people who have clicked on a website and then set themselves up to be Reiki professionals. So you really, want to choose your professional carefully. But if you have a credible, qualified professional, or, you receive a treatment as I did from a friend, Reiki practice is safe because, again, it's balancing. And there's no pathology, there's no danger attached to balance. Nobody's died of being too balanced. So even when Reiki practice is offered, for example, in hospice, when no one's kidding themselves that the body is going to right itself at this point, still it can help people find their timelessness and experience a sense of well-being as they're leaving their loved ones behind, and also for the family. So it can help us have better medical and even social outcomes and help with anxiety and such, because it's balancing. But also when we know we're not going to get the outcome that we would have preferred, it can help us
Right.
Align with what's happening.
And are there any side effects from doing this?
So if we come back to the idea of balance, no, there are no side effects. That said, anyone whose life depends on them having an accurate amount of a medication, for example, like a diabetic who is taking insulin, people in that situation are testing their levels constantly. And they, in my experience, always notice that their need for, and again, this is just my experience, the people I've trained or worked with, that their need for insulin is less. But because they're testing, they're able to make the adjustment.
Interesting.
So when the body is functioning better, and when it's self-healing to the capacity that it can, then it may affect your need for conventional interventions.
So can you combine Reiki practice with conventional medical
You can
practice?
absolutely. You can. I've been in surgery many times. I'm not myself getting surgery, but as a Reiki practitioner, most notably, I worked with Mehmet Oz, the heart surgeon at New York Presbyterian, and so when is a body more vulnerable than during a heart transplant or any other open heart surgery? And I would be there standing behind the drop and practicing Reiki generally on the patient's head, because that's the part of the body that they didn't need. And wherever you place your hands, that same global self-healing response is elicited.
And when you go to the doctor and ask about having Reiki treatments, are doctors open to this now?
I have found that we can't make blanket statements about doctors. I mean, doctors are people too. And, I first was brought into conventional medicine way back in the 90s because of the work that I was doing in the HIV community, teaching people with HIV/AIDS to practice Reiki self-care. And their specialists noticed, as one doctor who later trained with me, that invariably when one of his patients was doing quote unquote better than would be expected, and this was before the drug therapies that are available now. So better than would be expected meant somebody who was doing okay, that invariably that patient mentioned Reiki. And so that's why I was asked to set up programs in Beth Israel Medical Center, to my knowledge, the first hospital program, Reiki programs. So those doctors, when I went into hospital, I thought, there's two kinds of doctors. There's the real doctors and the witch doctors, and I knew which doctor they thought I was, and really I discovered I was so wrong. Even back then, in the 90s, there were many doctors who were very interested in what I was doing, but they didn't know how to know who was credible. So once I was in hospital, it was as if I had an honorary MD on my forehead, and doctors started pulling me aside and asking me if I could help their family members or even themselves, and many of them started training with me. So this was a huge surprise to me, huge surprise. I was so glad to be proved wrong in this case. And what I've seen over the last decades is that, yes, there's definitely more openness as the pros and cons of technological medicine have become clearer to us. Doctors are more interested in what can help patients be more comfortable, because doctors know feel better, heal better. And doctors also know that the patient who feels better is easier for them to care for. Are there still doctors who say things like, if I wasn't taught it in medical school, then it's not, it's not real? I'm sure there are, but to those doctors I would say, well, I have taught Reiki practice in medical schools, notably Yale Medical School, which is pretty well thought of, and others. So we're seeing a lot of diversity in medicine.
So if I'm interested in having a professional master Reiki treatment, how do I look for somebody, and what qualifications should I look for?
Very good question, and so important. We need to educate the public, because this is a buyer beware market, and you want to make an informed choice. If you make an informed choice, Reiki practice can be such a valuable resource, whether you go for treatment or you decide to learn to practice on yourself. And there are no standards, there's no clearinghouse, you really have to figure this out yourself. But here are some things to watch for. First of all, realize that, like me, you can have a perfectly wonderful experience with a friend or family member who practices Reiki at home for themselves. So if you know somebody like that and you're comfortable with them, go for it. That's definitely the best investment. But if you are looking for a professional, you want to ask questions, a lot of questions. And don't be afraid that you might put off this professional, because any credible, qualified Reiki professional is delighted to be grilled in this way. They want somebody who is coming in with reasonable expectations. So you want to ask the person how long they've been practicing, what their training was, and when it comes to training, more is better. You don't want somebody who learned first degree, second degree, and became a Reiki master in one sitting or one weekend or even a week or two. I learned first degree and second degree, and then I practiced for 4 years before I took a year-long training to be a Reiki master, like an apprenticeship. It's rare to find somebody with that amount of training, but, just to give you some range, then ask the person about their experience. Have they only practiced on themselves and family and friends? that's fine, but then you have different expectations than if you're paying somebody. If you're paying somebody, you want to know that that person is actually a professional and
course.
has professional experience. You might ask, do you have any doctors or licensed healthcare professionals, nurse practitioners or physician assistants or chiropractors or such who refer to you? That would be a very good recommendation. And as you're having this conversation or reading on the website, because on my website, for example, all of this is spelled out, but you're looking to see what is the Reiki professional's stance. Are they putting conventional medicine down? If they do that, go elsewhere. All right, you want somebody who's thinking, who's integrative. And then the last question, but for me it's the absolute deal breaker, is do you practice daily self-Reiki? And I can say that I have practiced self-Reiki every morning since I learned to practice Reiki in 1986. Reiki is a spiritual practice like meditation. You wouldn't go to a meditation teacher who didn't meditate every day. You wouldn't go to a yoga teacher who didn't have his or her own yoga practice. You know, this is how we learn about our practice and learn what is possible. This is how we learn about boundaries. You know, and somebody who doesn't have a daily self-practice is never going to understand the value of the practice or appreciate the boundaries in the same way as.
And how much does a treatment cost, and how many treatments does somebody normally need?
The fee for treatment is all over the place. I mean, it really depends upon the cost of living in any given area and the practitioner's experience. Also, there are other options, like, for example, I'm here in New York City, and the first Thursday of every month we have a public clinic at the Jewish Community Center, and people can get a Reiki treatment there for $20. But it's in a clinic, with 8 beds and 2 practitioners practicing simultaneously. So for many people, that's a very safe and cost-effective way to learn about Reiki practice. When finances are limited, I always encourage people to learn to practice Reiki, because as wonderful as it is to receive a treatment from someone else, nobody else's hands are there for you 24/7. And once you've learned to practice Reiki, not only can you give yourself a treatment every day, but you can also give yourself spot treatment during the day. Take a moment to just break the stress cycle when a day is getting the better of you,
Right.
to practice a little bit before you fall asleep. It's a one-time investment. First degree Reiki training is all the training most people need. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. But you want to look for a class that's around 10 hours with a group.
And tell me about the books that you've written.
Well, I've written one book that has been translated into a number of languages, but the name of the book is Reiki, A Comprehensive Guide. And I wrote it as a way for the public to read about Reiki practice in clear language, everyday language. It's Reiki for the mainstream person, because when people are interested in a New Age perspective, there are lots of people practicing Reiki in that way. But in terms of mainstream and conventional healthcare, that was the audience that I was seeking to serve. But then also, as people learn to practice, to be a continuing practice support for them. So there's a chapter on Reiki in the family, because you can practice Reiki on your children. You can practice Reiki on your aging parents if they're open to it. And several chapters on how Reiki practice is being used in conventional medicine and healthcare. And practice on each of a chapter on each of the levels of practice. So it is comprehensive, but I'm told it's a very comfortable read,
Oh.
not too technical.
And is it available at bookstores, at Amazon?
Yes, all of the above. And if you go to my website, which is ReikiInMedicine.org, on the lower right corner, there's a link where you can go right through to Amazon and purchase it there.
So if somebody wants to find a practitioner in their local area, like I live in Dallas, is there a website to go to that might help me find somebody?
You know, unfortunately, there isn't a comprehensive website. You can look at the ReikiAlliance.com and see if there is someone in your area that has Reiki masters who are trained traditionally. Or you can, just try to get in that network. Like you can, if you know an acupuncturist or a chiropractor or, someone who is more into an integrative perspective, you can ask them for a referral. You can Google Reiki. I mean, most of the people who come to my classes have found me through Google. And then you just have to kind of weed through, what's available in your area to find somebody that you feel connected to. I also have clients that I work with for distant practice that I've never met in person. And the advantage of that is that you can be in your own bed or on your own sofa so that as we finish the treatment, you're able to just rest there for as long as you want. And I've had people tell me that they have slept for hours, people who, had trouble sleeping. I'm also starting to train people online, but in a traditional way, not, recordings, but an online version of having people in the room with me, which is something that I'm starting because I see that there are so many people who are not able to access a credible training near them, or who are housebound, for example, and they need the accessibility of online training.
Pamela, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about Reiki. I know that it can start the conversation for a lot of people and make them feel comfortable that this would be sort of a wonderful addition to any treatment they're going to bring calmness to them and help them feel good. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Morgan. And when people practice Reiki or receive a Reiki treatment, they feel better. When we feel better, we function better. And when we feel better, we make better choices that help us continue to feel better. So thank you for giving me a chance to tell people about Reiki practice.
Well, thank you.
From the team at MD Source, here's to good health and to helping you become a more informed you. For the latest and most up-to-date information on health topics, visit mdsource.com. Drop us a line, sign up for our newsletter, and connect with us at mdsource.com.